Evidence tonight that the push from the Army to get more women fighting on the front line is failing. The Defence Force has been campaigning hard to get more women in combat roles, but responses from the Army and Senate estimates show that that effort is clearly not working. Only 24 of the 154 women recruited into the infantry since 2016 have been able to pass basic training. 24 out of 150-something. The Chief of Army, Angus Campbell, has also confirmed that some men will only be offered a position if no woman steps forward first. To discuss all of this, Bernard Gaynor, former Defence Force member who joins us on the line from Brisbane. Bernard, good evening.
Good evening, Ben.
So the push for women on the front line and in the infantry does not seem to be working based on these figures that have come to light via Senate estimates.
Well, it's clearly a failure because between 85 and 90% of females who are recruited for infantry roles within the Army can't even get through their recruit training or their basic infantry training. And that's just not the whole problem, because each one of these women is taking the spot of a male who probably would get through, or certainly would get through at far higher percentage rates.
All right, so let's just go over those numbers again. This is since 2016. 154 women put their hands up. And look, let me put my hand up and say thank you to those women for putting their hands up and wanting to be part of the service of this country. But out of the 154, the statistics are there for themselves. 24 passed.
Just 24, 14 of them were reservists and 10 were in the regular Army. Yeah, and sure, look, they're patriotic, they want to serve the nation, but frontline combat roles are no place for females, and we know this because already 25% of those who have passed their basic infantry training have been medically downgraded. And, you know, there is a serious problem here where the Chief of Army admitted to Senate estimates last night that Defence has conducted no research whatsoever into whether placing females in frontline combat roles is a good idea. And you don't need to be Einstein to work out why there might be a problem. Very shortly, Queensland is going to play New South Wales in the State of Origin, and being a strong Queensland supporter, I would love New South Wales to take a politically correct, diverse approach and start having quotas for females in the State of Origin side. But we all know that just won't work.
So out of the 24 who made it, then there's another figure that you've quoted, 25% then ended up being downgraded in some way, so they weren't able to hang in there. Do we know what the numbers are for men? Because it's all well and good for us to be saying, all right, well, out of 150, only 24 passed. Do we know, I don't expect you to have the numbers on you right now, but do we have any kind of estimate about what those stats are like when it comes to men who are putting their hands up to serve?
Look, that was a question that was asked of the Chief of Army last night, and we should get an answer to that in the next few weeks. But I can tell you from my own experience in the military, the pass ratio is far higher than 15%. I would imagine it would be in the order of 75 to 80%.
All right, Angus Campbell has also confirmed that there's a system in place to see women recruited first. You touched on this. Let's just have a look at what he had to say to Senate estimates.
We need to initially create some space, so rather than the 2,977 men queuing at the door for the limited number of jobs in any particular employment category, initially some space is held for some women. But 6 weeks out from recruitment and then training, 6 weeks out, if those spaces are not filled by women, they are filled in by men.
Back to Bernard Gaynor. Now, they say they don't have quotas. That sounds like a quota of sorts to me.
Well, it's a quota by another name, and I can tell you that according to Defence recruiting spreadsheets, the quota of jobs offered to females first is 100% for at least the next 6 months.
What about the research factor? There was a question asked at Senate estimates about, OK, you've got this big drive to get women in combat roles. What's the research showing that we are going to benefit as a Defence Force in having women on the front line in those combat roles?
Well, Ben, there is no research, and the Chief of Army admitted that last night. This is a politically correct flight of fancy that has been undertaken without any due diligence, and already we've seen 25% of females who have passed their basic infantry training medically downgraded. No one knows what the long-term health consequence on females will be. And as you mentioned right at the start, these are women who have signed up to serve this nation. The big question is, have they been put at unnecessary risk for no reason whatsoever? And if so, how much is the taxpayer going to have to fork out in the future for medical compensation and legal costs? Because I can tell you, it won't be the Chief of Army who forks out for the cost of this program. It will be the taxpayer.
To anyone watching thinking, OK, why does this bloke not want women in these roles? I mean, I know your heart's in the right place. I know that you're very passionate about the defence of this nation, but just enunciate some of those complications, some of those concerns about what happens when you introduce women into frontline combat roles.
Well, look, there are a number of reasons, but I'll go back to my analogy about the state of origin. You would not say that 50% of talent in New South Wales is female, therefore 50% of the state of origin side needs to be female, which is the argument that the Chief of Army put forward last night. It comes down to this. If females can't compete against men on the sporting field, why would we put them competing against men on a battlefield where the loser just doesn't get to go home and lick their wounds for a year? The loser goes home in a body bag.
Bernard Gaynor, I appreciate you coming on and breaking down some of those numbers for us tonight, and we look forward to hearing more out of the Defence Force when they answer more of those questions. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Ben.
Interesting chat with Bernard Gaynor.
But I would like to see the banks apologising for the diversity and inclusion agenda that they've been pushing, Ben, for the last few years at the expense, clearly, of everything else. And we saw that with the AMP, where you have 4 directors, they bundled the Sheilas in, say we've got to have some Sheilas on the board, whoopity-doodah, and 4 of them didn't have any experience in risk management, didn't have any experience in the crafts that you need to run AMP. So I bet it's the same at NAB, because they've been running the same, as of CBA, as of the ANZ, oh, look at us, diverse, inclusion, we've got all these right things, all virtue signalling.
Well, it's the same as what the Army's doing.
The Army are doing it, as you spoke to Bernard. And also, just on that point, Ben, in Britain, the first female recruit in the infantry gave up after 2 weeks. She said, this is too hard, I can't bloody do it.